special and not, separate and not, self and not. What am I really talking about? What am I trying to talk about? The question is, how do all these things relate, and what can we say about their relationship that doesn't just kind of totalize and say, well, this is what it's really about. This is what's really important. So I'm going to take the next few talks to try and pull some threads together. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to talk about the elephant in the room. We all know the elephant is there in the room, and I really want to talk about it, but that's the thing about the elephant in the room, that we don't talk about the elephant in the room. It's there, it's big, sometimes it's noisy, maybe it smells. It's the thing that we should be doing something about. It's what's actually important, but we don't talk about it because maybe that would be difficult, maybe it would be embarrassing, maybe we think it's just not possible to do anything about it. But whatever the reason, we don't talk about the elephant in the room. I might be sat on the couch watching TV and I fancy a drink, and I look round and the elephant's there in the doorway to the kitchen, and so I might get up and go out through the hall, go out through the front door, round the side of the house, come in through the back, find a drink that way in the kitchen. But maybe I go to the fridge and maybe the fridge is empty because the elephant's been in there, and well, I'm not going to say anything about it, am I? Because it's the elephant in the room. So what do I do? Well, I thought I'd start by talking about another elephant. Elephant in a traditional Buddhist sutta. Elephant which is a very common story, actually, across Indian subcontinent through time and space. There's Jain versions and Hindu versions, and I haven't found a version on the US Peace Corps website. So it's a pretty well-known elephant. This is the story of the elephant and blind men. And as it's often told, it's quite a nice story. There's a group of blind men who obviously have never seen an elephant, have never encountered an elephant, and they've heard stories about an elephant. So they want to know what an elephant is like, and they say what they think it's like. Eventually they set off, they find an elephant. I think they go to the royal palace, and the king says, sure, I can show you an elephant. And so the group of blind men go up to the elephant, and one guy grabs its trunk and goes, aha, an elephant is like a hose. Another guy puts his arms around its legs and goes, aha, an elephant is like a pole or a tall tree. Another guy grabs hold of the tail and goes, aha, an elephant is like a fly whisk, and so on. And of course, they end up kind of arguing about it. But eventually they see the wisdom of actually putting their pieces of knowledge together. So between them, they share their knowledge, they find out about the elephant, they put all the pieces of the jigsaw together. Great, if we can cooperate, we can find out about the world. It's a nice story. The Buddhist version is somewhat different. And I hadn't read it for a while, and thinking about elephants and thinking about the elephant in the room, I thought I'd go and look this story up. And I was actually quite shocked when I read it. So I thought I'd share it this evening and give you perhaps a kind of deviant reading. What can we do with a story like this? What does this actually tell us? Maybe a reading for idiots, because I'm an idiot, so I take things literally. I take things in the details. But let's see. Let's see whether we can have fun. This is the Tittha Sutta, the Buddhist parable of the blind men and the elephant. Thus I have heard, as all true suttas begin. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in the Jeta wood at Anathapindika's monastery. At that time, there were a number of recluses and Brahmins, wanderers of various sects living around Savatthi. And they were of various views, of various beliefs, of various opinions, and they relied for their support on their various views. There were some recluses and Brahmins who asserted and held this view: the world is eternal, only this is true, any other view is false. There were some recluses and Brahmins who asserted the world is not eternal, only this is true and any other view is false. There were some who asserted the world is finite, the world is infinite. The life principle and the body are the same. The life principle and the body are different. The Tathagata exists beyond death. The Tathagata does not exist beyond death. The Tathagata both exists and does not exist beyond death. It's fairly standard Buddhist procedure. We go through every conceivable possibility. And this is about views. It's exactly about views. It's about holding to an abstract notion as the essential thing, the vital thing. Everything depends on whether the world is infinite or not, whether the Tathagata exists after death or not. That's the Buddha, by the way. Where are we? And they lived quarrelsome, disputatious and wrangling, wounding each other with verbal darts, saying, Dharma is like this. No, Dharma is not like that. Dharma is not like this. Dharma is like that. Then a number of monks, having put on their robes in the forenoon and taken their bowls and outer cloaks, entered Savatthi for alms food. Having walked in Savatthi for alms food and returned after the meal, they approached the Buddha, prostrated themselves, sat down to one side, and said, At present, revered sir, there are a number of recluses and Brahmins, wanderers of various sects, living around Savatthi. And they are of various views, saying, Dhamma is like this, Dhamma is like that. And so the Buddha speaks. The wanderers of other sects, monks, are blind, unseeing. They do not know what is beneficial. They do not know what is harmful. They do not know what is Dhamma. They do not know what is not Dhamma. Not knowing what is beneficial and what is harmful, not knowing what is Dhamma and what is not Dhamma, they are quarrelsome, saying, Dhamma is like this, Dhamma is like that. And then we go into the story proper. Formerly, monks, there was a certain king in this very Savatthi, and that king addressed a man. Come now, my good man, bring together all those persons in Savatthi who have been blind from birth. Yes, your majesty, the man replied, and after detaining all the blind people in Savatthi, he approached the king and said, All the blind people in Savatthi have been brought together, your majesty. Now, my man, show the blind people an elephant. Very well, your majesty, the man replied to the king, and he presented an elephant to the blind people, saying, This, blind people, is an elephant. To some of the blind people he presented the head of the elephant, saying, This is an elephant. To some he presented an ear of the elephant, saying, This is an elephant. To some he presented a tusk, the trunk, the body, the foot, the hind quarters, the tail, the tuft at the end of the tail, saying, This is an elephant. Then, monks, the man having shown the elephant to the blind people, went to the king and said, The blind people have been shown the elephant, your majesty. Do now what you think is suitable. Then the king approached those blind people and said, Have you been shown the elephant? Yes, your majesty, we have been shown the elephant. Tell me, blind people, what is an elephant like? Those blind people who had been shown the head of the elephant replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a water jar. Those blind people who had been shown the ear of the elephant replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a winnowing basket. Those blind people who had been shown the tusk of the elephant replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a ploughshare. Those blind people who had been shown the trunk replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a plough pole. Those blind people who had been shown the body replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a storeroom. Those blind people who had been shown the foot replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a post. Those blind people who had been shown the hindquarters replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a mortar. Those blind people who had been shown the tail replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a pestle. Those blind people who had been shown the tuft at the end of the tail replied, An elephant, your majesty, is just like a broom. Saying, An elephant is like this, an elephant is not like that, an elephant is not like this, an elephant is like that. They fought each other with their fists, and the king was delighted with the spectacle. Even so, monks are those wanderers of various sects, blind, unseeing, saying, Dhamma is like this, Dhamma is like that. Then, on realizing its significance, the Buddha uttered on that occasion this inspired utterance. Some recluses and Brahmins, so called, are deeply attached to their own views. People who only see one side of things engage in quarrels and disputes. And so I think the intended meaning is quite clear. It does go on a bit. If we see only one side of things, if we take a view and pin our understanding of life on that view, we will come into error, we will come into dispute because other people will think different things. That seems perfectly fair. But there is a unifying view, the unifying view of the king, who sees the elephant. And this is a problem because it doesn't actually rely on us putting our different knowledges together, because there is this underlying view. In the Buddhist version, all you have to do is just see the elephant. That's easy, that's straightforward. But of course you have to be able to see. And, well, who sees? The Buddha sees all Dharma, understands all Dharma. So he can basically tell us what the deal is. I found another critical view of this story on a Christian website, which makes exactly the same point, that, no, actually, it's not about putting different knowledges together. There is this totalizing view, this one single view, which is simply right. And then, of course, being Christians, they perfectly reasonably asked, what happens if the elephant speaks? Presumably in that version says there is only one living God as revealed in the Bible, and Jesus Christ is his son, died for our sins, was raised on this, whenever it was, Easter Sunday, and you take it from there. So there is a right view, there's a whole view, there's an answer. So I want to go back to the beginning and think about this a little bit more. I won't read the whole thing again. All the suttas were, I was going to say written, they weren't written. They were chanted for memorization. The repetition is an important part of them. They just go through the same verbal formula again and again and again and again, so it sticks in the mind and you just slot it in. Reading or listening, maybe not so good. unless of course you're trying to learn to memorise. Okay, so what's important here for us? I suppose the interesting thing, first of all, is in this version, it's actually the king's idea. He's going to get all these people together. He's going to use his authority. He's going to take command of the situation. I don't know what the blind people were doing. I assume they had their own affairs. I assume they were busy leading their own lives. But the king decides that they're just going to be rounded up and marched off to perform for him. Does he know what's going to happen? I suspect he hopes what's going to happen. So the first thing that we have is this totalizing view is about authority. He has knowledge and he's going to use that authority for his own purposes. In fact, for his own entertainment. That's a bit different. Okay, so yes, Your Majesty, the man replied, and after detaining all the blind people in Savatthi, he approached the king and said, "They're here. Now, my man, show the blind people an elephant." And of course he can't show the blind people an elephant because they'd never be able to see it, then they'd know what it was. So what he will do on the king's authority is take each blind person, place their hands on a particular portion of the elephant, a limited portion of the elephant, and only that portion of the elephant. He'll actually ensure that they have a limited view. He'll confine their view. What happens? They get a very partial knowledge of the elephant. Then they're obliged to speak. They're lined up like school children or something. Tell us what you've found out about an elephant. Show and tell. Well, each one of them has found out something. And what they've found out is actually in the way that we acquire and use virtually all of our knowledge. The elephant is like. Not this is a pole, but the elephant is like a plough pole. Oh, yeah, sure. His foot is. Is seeing an elephant a completely different experience from that? Do we just see the reality? The king certainly seems like he knows what an elephant is. I can see an elephant. I know what an elephant is. Not like you idiots. Who have I arranged to only have a very limited experience of an elephant? But he sees the whole. And because he sees the whole and he knows that whole as a whole, he can arrange for these blind people to experience only a part. And because they've only been allowed to experience a part, they will disagree. Their likes, what I think it's like, is different from what you think it's like. Yeah, it's back to views again. But how did I come by that view? Why did I adopt that view? Well, I was led to it. It's not my own intuition of an elephant. It's just effectively what I was shown, what I was told. And I was told that was an elephant. And so I thought that's what an elephant was. What about the king? Do we think he's a wise king? Do we think he's a compassionate king whose idea of fun is humiliating people with a disability? Being amused by people fighting each other? It's an elegant demonstration a very contrived, very set up demonstration. But I think we might ask whether he has either wisdom or compassion here. Does he know what an elephant is? I mean, he sees an elephant. He probably can think of other instrumental uses of an elephant. You can use an elephant for hauling logs. He probably puts some soldiers on top of one when he wants to go and attack the neighbouring country. War elephants. There's another Buddhist story about war elephants. But his knowledge of the elephant is partial. It's just a visual image in this moment, or the uses to which I can put this creature. In a world of impermanence and interdependence, where the elephant is in fact the product of the whole world, connects with the whole world. It's not just this sight, just this image of it. And of course we tend to privilege sight a lot in our metaphors, in our language, in the way that we talk about the world, hugely. We think about sight as revealing. The enlightenment is the bringing of light into every corner of experience, every corner of the world. Touch, we know, is much more limited in its scope, in its reach. Literally, my reach is more limited than my sight. And yet, in privileging sight, we lose track that it's only one sense, as touch, as smell, as taste, as hearing, or one sense. We build up our pictures, build up our understanding of life from wholes, from all of the senses working together. So is our visual knowledge more direct? It's a nice metaphor. But of course we know that actually these people who were born blind, if you could wave a magic wand, say a spell, and suddenly give them vision, what would they see? Blurred, moving lights. I mean, this has happened. Blurred, moving lights, incoherent patternings. And over time, they'd learn, person, door, cup. It takes time because one learns to see things. One learns what things are. One learns how things are. One learns what things are because they're like things that one already knows. We're actually back at the position of the blind people in the story. Effectively, the story is asking us to choose. Are we the blind people, the stupid people with a disability, or are we the king, wise and all-seeing? Well, I think we're always the blind people. We're trying to make the best sense we can of our experience of this world, of how things fit together. And I just come back to why the blind people have such a limited experience of the elephant. And it's not because they're blind. It's because they're only allowed to see a part of it. Now, the reason they're only allowed to see a part of it is directly the king's authority. Are there ways in which we are restricted in our view, our understanding of the world? Well, I think it's fairly obvious that there are very many. And these touch upon the elephant in the room. We can talk about the media, we can talk about the style of our politics, we can talk about the way that important things, many, many important things, are not talked about, or are talked about in certain ways and not in others, because we don't talk about things like that. But equally, of course, we limit ourselves. We've talked about the sankharas, the mental formation, so many times. Our experience of the world, formed by so many different things, means that we see it in certain ways. We'll only see certain things. And when we see certain things in certain ways, we'll understand certain things by that seeing and not others. We limit ourselves. We are formed in a limited way. Our society would limit us further. So without thinking that we can reach for this simple, immediate, connected, clear, universal seeing that light will shine on every part of our experience and part of the world, and suddenly we will have it all, we will understand it all, without adopting a single view saying, well, it's just down to capitalism, or whatever, or whatever the QAnon conspiracy says it's down to, or COVID vaccines or whatever. Without doing that, how can we connect these things up? How can we talk about the things that we don't see, or don't want to see, or do see, but we don't talk about? What's the elephant in the room? Well, I'll talk about talking about the elephant in the room a bit more next time.